The problem, my son-in-law's boat, who's storing it on my property, his canvas top has gotten full water from a gigantic rainstorm we had. So trying to come up with an easy way to empty it. As you can see, it's like a swimming pool. My solution was to come up with a homemade vacuum aspirator. This is what this is. I'm going to first show you what it could do, and then we'll, towards the end of the video, show you how I put it together. Hope you enjoy it. Sucking water out of the boat cover. Need a screen on there though. It immediately clogged up with some junk. But it works. Seems to work pretty good. Once I got it siphoning, just siphon action because it's downhill, it works pretty good. But you can see this is excellent. It's better than I thought it would. The key to it, I found out, is having this pipe long enough to provide basically a water seal, and enough velocity pulls it that way. We'll take another look. Okay, we got our garden hose turned on full blast. You see there, the blue tape here is where the copper tube, the 3/8 inch copper tube comes in. It comes down like this. Okay, so, and this is the vacuum we're getting, roughly 11.5 inches of mercury. We're going to switch that around, flip the vacuum gauge and the garden hose sides, and we'll see what happens. Okay, we've got the vacuum gauge on the metal tubing side, the copper tubing side. We got about 1 inch of mercury of vacuum. And the hose is wide open. Let's put that there, make sure there's no restriction. It didn't change anything. So we'll put it back on the other side, which seemed to be working much better. Okay, we're back. The garden hose on the copper tubing side, the vacuum gauge on the other side. That's pretty close to where it was before. We're about 10.5 inches of vacuum now. Could be a slight difference in change in water pressure. But it definitely works better this way than with the flows reversed. So now, one other thing I want to do is since it works so well, removing water from that boat cover, to see just how fast it can remove water. We'll try to get an estimate of that. Okay, back to our normal setup with the garden hose attached to the leg with the copper tubing. Now we've got a short piece of hose here. I'll measure 5 gallons of water into this bucket. I've got a timer on my iPad here, trying not to create a big mess, and try to start it at the same time I put this in there, and we'll see what time it takes. Okay. See how long it takes to remove all the water, 5 gallons out of this bucket.
One minute and 0 seconds.
Tilt the bucket, try to get all of it. There we go, 108. I wasn't able to video the empty boat cover yesterday because it got dark on me. But, and a little bit, whatever was left in the bottom, and just evaporated out day. But you can see we got all the water out, and it took probably about an hour to get it out. Some of it was just siphoning. Most of it was with the aspirator running. So, it worked great. Can't complain. I don't get that lucky usually on the first go-round of something. This is a typical lab vacuum aspirator. You might use in a chemistry lab. I've had it for years for my experiments. Primarily to pull a vacuum, so you're moving air, not necessarily pumping water. So, but this works very well. As you can see, hooked up to the same garden hose or other homemade apparatus we got, it looks like about 28 28.5 inches mercury vacuum. So it's very good at pulling a vacuum, not necessarily so good at moving water out of the boat cover. All right, I'm going to show you how I made this homemade vacuum aspirator. This is a lab type vacuum aspirator we used to use in chemistry labs a long time ago when I was much younger. And you can pull a pretty good vacuum with them. Just attach them to a lab faucet, and you can use this for suction filtration or whatever. As you can see in the video, you can get a pretty good vacuum with it. But you can't move a lot of water with it. And that's what my objective was in this case. I believe this was made with a Venturi, and what I did was not. A little different. But I decided, okay, let me look around. What can I use just to gather parts and whatever I've got available to make something? So I thought maybe I could use a garden hose Y, where it's put a tubing down one side and work with something like that. Well, this one doesn't work. It's die cast. That's not the issue. Materials of construction don't matter in this case. But the internal diameter is too small. Just so happened that I had a non-valved Y, and it was had the big enough openings in it that I could put 3/8 inch soft copper in there. I just happened to have some of this laying around. I bent it by hand. Better to use a tubing bender because this stuff will collapse on you. But I just guessed at the length. I bent it enough to follow this path in here through one side of this. Arbitrarily picked one side, put it in there, and then used basically a 5-minute epoxy to seal it in there, and worked real well. The brand you use and all that probably doesn't matter as long as it'll stick to metal in here. Or if you use plastic, you'd obviously need one that will stick to plastic. But then I said, okay, the other side here is kind of open. Flow is going to go past that tube. And I guessed at 1/2 inch diameter pipe. I happen to have some just galvanized 1/2 inch pipe laying around. Also had a male hose to male 3/4 inch pipe fitting. And I could put that in there like that, and it fits on there. All these other fittings, ignore all those. They don't really matter because it's just what I happen to have. It could all be a piece of plastic or something else. It doesn't matter. I think what does matter is the relative length and diameter. If this was real big and you're just shooting water down through a big opening, it ain't going to pull any suction on it at all. If it's too small, there's not enough room for the surface water coming through to drag any water along with it. So it's got to be just the right size, and it just so happened this works real well. When I first did it, I just had this much pipe. And when I put that in there, you can see it only came to about here. Well, the spray coming out of here didn't create a good plug flow at the end of this. And I thought, well, it didn't work well. So I happened to have another piece of pipe. Again, this is just what I had laying around and a coupling. Put it on there. And as you can see from the video, it worked great. Not very many times in my life have I had ideas, and the first time I try them, they work, in this case, even better than I'd hoped for. Now, since we're running flows backwards through this fitting, you're going to need a way to get from a male end of a typical garden hose into the male end of this. So I thought, well, I've got a washer hookup hose here, and it's got female on both ends. That should work, but it didn't because the way it's made in there, the openings are really too small, and I couldn't get a good seal against where this copper pipe was. So I also had another little piece of hose laying around, and already had a female fitting on one side, and I had the fittings to put a female attachment on the other. And this gets you from the male end of a garden hose onto here. Now this side of it really doesn't matter. Any hose will work. Just put the female end on there and toss the male end into the bucket or the boat cover, whatever it is you're trying to get water out of, and that should work. I want to stress that you should only do something like this if you have plenty of tap water available or some other source of pressure water. If you're in a drought-stricken area, you don't want to be wasting water, but then again, you probably don't have much water you got to move. So, but if you need to empty out your basement, or you've got something where you need to move some water and there's plenty of water available, this is not an issue. And usually you're just looking at temporary use anyway. This is a great way to move it without electrocuting yourself by plugging in an electric pump out in a wet area. So when you're doing something like this, make sure you give yourself a chance to try various iterations of whatever it is you're doing, so you don't get fixated on one possible solution without looking at something else that you didn't really think of. So that's why I like to basically just use available information and come up with my own ideas. Somebody else has probably already done this in some way, shape, or form. You could probably even buy a store-bought version of this off Amazon or something. A vacuum aspirator is big enough to move this kind of water. But since we've got Hurricane Henri going up to the northeast, and Tropical Storm Fred just went through, people might find themselves in a situation where they have no power, but they still have unrestricted water. If they do, they can use something like this to pump out their basement or help themselves out in an emergency situation without having to worry about electricity or getting electrocuted, anything like that. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please click on the round button and subscribe. Like the video, and check out our other videos. We have an upcoming video we're working on making a drinking bird type of heat engine, but without methylene chloride, and also one on looking at the effect of magnetic fields on ions in solution. So hopefully those will turn out reasonably well. So please subscribe by clicking on the round button and check out our other links. Thank you.